My name is Aliya Farmanali. I'm a senior in the College of Arts and Sciences, majoring in urban studies and minoring in Arabic and Islamic studies. I'm also a submatriculant into the nonprofit leadership program in Penn School of Social Policy and Practice. The talk that I'm going to be giving today is drawn from research which I have done for my urban studies senior thesis, which centers around the experiences of workers in social services. Workers at all levels of social services contend with a wide variety of challenges and stressors, often leading to the experience of stresses such as burnout and secondary or vicarious trauma. Regular interactions with struggling clients, high workloads and caseloads, and low pay all contribute to the strain that workers experience. Individual workers have the agency to effect small but substantive changes in their lives through intentionally incorporating acts of self-care. However, many of the struggles that workers face are due to systemic issues affecting provider organizations, the field of social services, and society more generally. Given this context, my thesis attempts to hone in on the forms and the spectrum of training and support in place for workers across social service professions who have direct contact with clients and may consequently experience vicarious trauma or burnout. As part of my research, I interviewed 20 individuals who are either frontline workers, individuals in supervisory and managerial roles, or individuals providing training to workers in the two other categories. Participants could also be distinguished by whether they lacked a clinical background or had a clinical degree, such as a degree in social work. Through these interviews, I've developed a better understanding not only of the supports that are in place for workers in social services, but also where the disparities in support lie. I have learned that while not all stresses can be avoided or prevented, supervision and training are key supports that organizations can provide to enhance worker self-efficacy and overall well-being. However, clinical staff receive better supervision and training than staff without clinical backgrounds, who are often staffing frontline positions. This is the case even though both clinical and non-clinical workers in social services are prone to the same stresses from interacting with clients and working within stressed systems. Clinical workers receive a wide variety of supports, at the core of which is supervision. This may include group supervision, individual supervision, or both, depending on the agency, and supervision may be regularly scheduled or provided on an as-needed basis. Clinical workers were more likely to emphasize the importance and the presence of supervision that focuses on emotional health, on processing, on coping with, and on the prevention of stress, as opposed to solely addressing administrative or logistical issues. Several clinical workers also discussed how their organizations offer trainings and professional development opportunities in-house, or pay for clinical staff to pursue these opportunities independently. Of course, the accessibility of these supports for workers can be impacted by how well-resourced an organization is, as well as the funding priorities of the organization. Clinical workers also receive robust education and training prior to entering the field. Because of their degree programs and related internship experiences, workers with a clinical background are more well-equipped to work within stress systems and seek out or even negotiate for holistic supervision because they have been trained to do so, and because their credentials can afford them more recognition and influence. On the other hand, workers without clinical backgrounds are similarly prone to stresses because of their direct engagement with clients and high caseloads, yet they appear to receive less support than workers with clinical backgrounds. Oftentimes, they are provided with very limited training and are not afforded the same access to opportunities that clinical workers may receive. Moreover, organizations often appear to overlook non-clinical staff when structuring supervision. For the non-clinical workers who often staff frontline positions, supervision is much more administrative and evaluative in nature. In some environments in which holistic supervision is not provided, and in which the supervisor role leans towards the evaluation end, having group meetings for non-clinical frontline workers without supervisors present can actually be a relief, though this is typically in organizations that are described as not being the most supportive in terms of resources, supervision, or culture. I've highlighted the disparity in support offered to clinical versus non-clinical workers, but there are also other gaps in support provided to workers in social services. For example, individuals in leanly structured organizations, as well as workers in supervisory roles, may not receive the support they need because there is no one able or available to supervise them. Instead of receiving formal support through their workplace, workers may have to pay out of pocket for outside supervision or therapy to better ensure their well-being. In the case of clinical supervisors, however, clinical educations and field experience provide them with the frameworks to name and understand stresses such as vicarious trauma, and their training makes it more likely that they will seek out and find the formal support that they need. Workers without a clinical education do not have these same privileges. Therefore, non-clinical frontline workers may find increased difficulty in accessing support, which can make addressing clients' needs and managing stresses more difficult. Regardless of whether there are formalized supports in place within agencies, many participants highlighted the value of informal supports and positive aspects of workplace culture. Many participants, for example, described the importance of worker camaraderie. Many also made reference to open-door policies within their organizations. However, it is important to note that it was often the individuals in supervisory roles who emphasized the open-door policies maintained within their organizations. Frontline workers, on the other hand, were not as quick to highlight open-door policies or their value. Therefore, it seems that aspects of workplace culture, such as open-door policies, are not sufficient to support workers unless there are more formalized and regular forms of support which are set in place and facilitated by the organization and by organizational leadership, such as the holistic supervision which clinical workers are more likely to receive. In light of the forms of support and disparities in support which I have discussed, I would like to conclude my talk by considering how organizations may prioritize clients at the expense of worker well-being and may foster a culture in which workers feel undervalued and undersupported. Of course, part of this cultural difficulty stems from systemic issues that extend beyond any one organization. Many organizations have high demands for their services, but struggle for funding and for resources and have a limited number of staff. However, in striving to serve many clients and overwhelmed by the level of need, organizations may in fact place strain on their workers by assigning overwhelming caseloads to workers, but not allocating the funding needed to provide training and supervision. This strain on workers can ultimately filter down to the care provided to clients and may also result in increased turnover within an organization if these issues remain unaddressed. Therefore, a key challenge is for organizations to actively prioritize worker well-being in the midst of overwhelming need for their services and lack of resources. My research leads me to believe that it is crucial that organizations find ways to facilitate community, safe spaces, and open dialogue for all workers within their workplaces in ways that extend beyond the maintenance of an open-door policy. While adequate support cannot make up for every deficiency in an organization or completely prevent workers from experiencing stresses such as vicarious trauma and burnout, it drastically impacts worker well-being for the better, with positive implications for client care as well.